Welcome to the part 3 of aerobic respiration, and this is the final stage of oxidative phosphorylation, or also the electron transport chain. So far in the process of aerobic respiration, we have seen how 6-carbon glucose is split in glycolysis to a 3-carbon pyruvate that is fed into the Krebs cycle, and it yields carbon dioxide and hydrogen atoms. As you're probably aware, carbon dioxide is a waste product and it's removed during the process of gaseous exchange. Hydrogen atoms are valuable as a potential source of energy. So these hydrogen atoms are carried by the coenzymes NAD and FAD into this next stage. So in this next stage, this is where most of the ATP is made or synthesized. So energy is carried by electrons to produce the ATP, and the electrons are coming from the reduced NAD and reduced FAD. Just a quick recap related to mitochondria. As we'll know, each mitochondrion is bounded by a smooth outer membrane and an inner membrane that is folded into extensions called the cristae. So the inner space or matrix of the mitochondrion contains protein, lipids, and traces of DNA. Obviously in mitochondria, it's the site of oxidative phosphorylation. So within the inner folded membrane are the enzymes and the other proteins involved in oxidative phosphorylation, and hence ATP synthesis. They occur in great numbers in metabolically active cells, so that would include muscles, liver and epithelial cells, which all carry out active transport. And that's a little clue about the type of exam questions you might get. So if it's talking about those kind of areas, then you're assuming there's large numbers of mitochondria, therefore lots of respiration. Okay, so onto the electron transfer chain. So there are several steps that go through. So as you can see, there are different carriers. So we've got carriers 1, 2 and 3. Okay, and we've also got our reduced NAD and FAD over here that has come from produced during glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. And what happens is, the first thing to happen is that hydrogen is released from the reduced NAD and FAD, okay, and they become oxidized, and the hydrogen atoms split into protons and electrons. Now the electrons, they're going to pass along the chain of electrons, and as they do, they're going to lose some of their energy. So as they release that energy, this causes the active transport of these protons through the carrier, and they're actively transported across the inner mitochondrial membrane into the intermembranial space. Okay, so between the inner and outer mitochondrial membrane. So the electrons are losing energy, so I like to think of it as going down the stairs. So you lose energy as you go down the stairs. So that energy is transferred by the electrons and it's used by the electron carriers, and there's electron carriers, they pump those proteins into the intermembrane space. So now you can see there's lots of hydrogen protons, and it's now higher in this intermembrane space than in the matrix. So this forms what we call an electrochemical gradient. So you've got a much higher gradient in the intermembrane space compared to in the matrix. So it's a concentration gradient of ions. So now the protons, they can now move down this electrochemical gradient through ATP synthase. These are channels embedded in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So this movement drives the synthesis of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. So you can see there, sorry, I'll show you again. You can see there ADP drives the synthesis of ATP from ADP. So this is called chemiosmosis. Now you may notice, if you've done about photosynthesis, about the light dependent reaction, you will know that it involves the same type of processes to explain photophosphorylation in the light dependent stage of photosynthesis. It's very similar, if not the same. And then the final stage in the matrix at the end of the transport chain, the protons and electrons and oxygen from the blood combine to form water. Okay. Now, oxygen that is available, acts as what we call the final acceptor, a final electron acceptor of the hydrogen atoms. And without its role in removing hydrogen atoms at the end of the chain, the hydrogen ions, the protons and electrons, they would literally back up, okay, along the chain, and the process of respiration would come to a halt. Okay, so to summarize about how much ATP is made, as it says there, you've seen how oxidative phosphorylation makes ATP. Now, usually, okay, there is some debate about this, but each reduced NAD makes about 2.5 ATP, and each reduced FAD makes 1.5. Now, there is the jury's out slightly on this, but we'll take that as given at the moment. Now, in terms of the stages of respiration, you can see how much ATP and NAD is produced. Okay, so we can look at the molecules produced and the numbers of ATP. So you can see glycolysis, link reaction, there is no ATP produced. Glycolysis, you've got 2 ATP, and then you can work out from the reduced NAD and the reduced FAD, you can find that it totals 32 ATP. 28 molecules of those ATP are produced in oxidative phosphorylation. So you can see the importance of that final stage. Okay, so here's an exam style question, and I think I will do another video to go through the type of exam questions they can ask you. So as you can see, it represents the 2 stages of aerobic respiration, and it asks you to name substance X. Well, the clue is substance X is in the cytoplasm, so basically before it goes into the link reaction, therefore it must be pyruvate. Then question B, which stage of aerobic respiration takes place inside a mitochondrion and is not represented in the diagram? So if you look, you can see oxygen is going in, so that must be the ETC. You've got the link reaction with acetyl coenzyme A, but I can't see the Krebs cycle, so that is the answer, is the Krebs cycle. And finally, so this is a 3-mark question, so it asks you to explain, so give a reason why oxygen is needed for the production of ATP on the cristae of the mitochondrion. Now this is a very popular style of question because it's checking your understanding of the final stages of the ETC. So the first thing to think about is the production of ATP. So ATP is formed as electrons pass along the electron transport chain. And if you think about it, at the end of the transport chain, oxygen is what we call a terminal electron acceptor. And so for the final mark, you've got to say if oxygen wasn't present, then electrons cannot be passed along the ETC if there is no oxygen to accept them. So that will explain why oxygen is needed for the production of ATP on the cristae of the mitochondrion. As I said, I'll probably be doing another video looking at aerobic respiration style of questions, but my next video is going to concentrate on anaerobic respiration. So I hope you found it useful, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Dr. Biology. I will see you soon.